Minister, Michael Masutha, had turned that recommendation down. But to talk to us on the issue, we're joined in studio now by Solly Mapaila, who is from the South African Communist Party. He's the second Deputy General Secretary. Good to have you in studio. Welcome.
Thank you, Liam.
Let's get your immediate reaction to the court's decision.
Obviously, it's a disappointing time now because we feel that it was not yet time to release Janusz Walus on the basis of legal grounds. And I believe that the judge did not consider a lot of things in that regard. For instance, the victim-offender dialogue had not even taken place, which is one of the major requirements before a person is placed on parole. Indeed, Janusz did try to approach the family to initiate such a process. But the family responded by giving him some questions to answer so that we can start that particular process. And he did not respond to those questions. To our surprise, these were included in the judge's ruling as if our consideration was taken into consideration together with the family. But also, what is also critical in a matter of this nature is to consider the records of the trial judge. At the time that he was tried, the judge had indicated that he had committed a cold-blooded murder that was premeditated, that was actually carried out on a defenseless and unarmed man, and that the court must impose the highest sentence, the harshest sentence possible. Yeah. And that's why they gave them a death sentence at the time, which was, of course, committed to life sentence given the development of our democratic dispensation. So also that has to be taken into consideration. And we believe that the judge in this case didn't pay enough attention to that area. That's why we are quite clear that there are huge prospects for successful appeal. We
saw the reaction from the late Chris Hani's wife, Hani, yesterday. She was furious at this judgment handed down. And we do know that during the court proceedings, the judge actually asked her to forgive the killer. How is she feeling? I mean, obviously, we've seen her speaking, but what is her reaction? Have you spoken to her? What does she feel? I mean, I imagine that she feels that justice has not been served.
Well, I mean, she is devastated. We were with her yesterday at the court, even last week when the judge confronted her, which was quite unfair and insensitive, actually, that the judge left the issues to speak to her directly to say, look, it's more than 20 years, we must move on and forgive and so forth. And I think that's where the problem is, because the victims have to prove themselves to be forgiven, irrespective of whether the offenders, the perpetrators of these heinous crimes, are having a sense of remorse or even ask for forgiveness from the family, which in any case, Janusz Walus never intended to do that from the beginning. That is why she really felt devastated by this. But nonetheless, I think yesterday when we went to the court, she was more or less expecting some kind of negative news on the basis of what the judge had said initially. Yeah. And we really believe that the judge disregarded the law and used emotions into the legal process.
Yeah. I want to go back to the issue where you said that a letter was actually written to Janusz Walus with a list of questions and from the family asking Walus to respond to them. What kind of questions are we talking about? Was it clarity on what happened that day, on what was behind the murder?
Yes, you see, in 2012 when we went to the parole court, Chris' daughter had come into confrontation for the first time with the killers of her father. And in that particular process, she broke down and felt that perhaps she needed to deeply understand what was happening. And Walus at that time wanted to express some feelings of how he feel about what he did to the family. We then advised at the time that they must use the normal process, which is to consult our lawyers so that they initiate that particular process, which is what he did by writing a letter to want to meet. And on that basis, the family agreed, but sent some questions. One of the questions was for him to speak the truth, because you'll remember that the TRC refused to grant him amnesty together with Clive W. Lewis on the basis that they could not reveal the whole truth. Yeah. There were many issues that were considered, for instance, that should have been followed for further investigation. The gun that was used was procured by W. Lewis. But as to where did he procure it and so forth, those leads were not properly followed. So the family had many unanswered questions because they were quite arrogant at the TRC and they didn't really care. And we felt that perhaps the victim-offender dialogue process could actually surface some of those things and could actually surface the truth, upon which the family was really prepared to consider that and move on. But we can't impose the move on the family when there's no truth. And in fact, as it is, it's been released, like WS has been released, and we'll never know the real motive why they killed Comrade Chris.
There's been a call from the ANC demanding basically that Janusz Walus be immediately deported to his country of origin. Would you like to see the same thing happening?
Well, we want Janusz Walus to complete his parole process, possibly here. Because how are we going to impose the parole conditions when he goes to Poland? It's basically to make him a free man. And I think that he must be here under strict supervision of the correctional services for his parole conditions. And we believe that the minister can put stringent parole conditions so that he's not having a sense of victory, that he has done this dastardly act and still believes that he has his freedom whilst the family remains in mourning.
We know that the minister, and in fact, our guest in the next hour is the minister himself, so we'll speak to him and find out what his way forward is. But we know that he's examining exactly what has been said. I mean, he denied the parole last year, didn't want it to happen, but now it has happened. Appeal, is that something that you believe can be enforced?
Yes, there are huge prospects for successful appeal, and I think that you remember that we were granted the permission by the North Gauteng High Court, the same court, for us to join the ministry and the department in the case as the SACP and the family after our application in 2014. We are going to definitely encourage them to appeal because we are the third and fourth respondents in the case. And I think the minister is quite shocked himself. I've heard his statements, and he had very legal grounds to refuse the appeal at the time, and a number of considerations have not been resolved. So we will support that process.
Yeah, I remember talking to him at the time, and he was dead against it. So it'll be interesting to see his reaction this morning. Just finally, as we wrap up this conversation, we talk about South Africa being a forgiving nation and the reconciliatory way that we find ourselves. And I know that there's a letter, and there's the words of the letter. I know I was reading it here on the front page from Janusz Walus to the family of Chris Hani, basically saying that it was in 2014. I do owe the apology to you a very long time. Mrs. Hani, I do know that whatever I would do, I will not compensate for what I have done to you. The only thing that I can do is say I am very sorry for what I have subjected you through all these years. If forgiveness is impossible, I will fully understand and respect your decision. He, in a way, has reached out. He's tried to apologize, but I suppose it's not necessarily the apology they're looking for. It's the truth. Yes,
you see, they're also looking for the real apology. This apology was made as a technical process for him to get the parole. You remember that for quite some years he was not even interested in these matters. He joined Clive W. Lewis when W. Lewis was trying to get out on medical grounds. And then during that period when we were interfacing, then he realized that it is a requirement that he has to initiate a process of engagement with the family. So this was written as a mechanical process just to support his application to get out.
So it's remorse that you feel is completely missing here.
Yes, that's the issue that the family is seeking, and the truth in that regard. And the remorse in this case for Janusz will come from revealing the truth. That's the essential part.
Solly Mapaila, thank you very much for talking to us. The second Deputy Secretary General at the SACP.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Let's take a break.